also have a handout that I'm going to put in the chat. You don't need it during the session, but you can just hang on to it for later in case there's anything you want to check out after. Okay, Jamie, do you want me to get started or do you want to say anything?
Let's see. Yeah, so we have Carrie Torres with us today. Yay, and she's feeling well. So this is one that we had rescheduled, and we are super psyched to have gotten her back on the schedule. But yeah, she's going to be talking about various tools that we can use to support a diversity of learners in our classes. Thanks, Carrie.
All right, I'm just going to get started right away. And just a little bit of housekeeping. As I just mentioned, I put a digital handout in the chat, and I'll share it again at the end if anybody misses it. But I'm going to share a variety of digital tools that you can use in your classroom. And these are tools you can really use in an online class, a hybrid class, or you can even integrate into face-to-face classes to provide additional support. I'm going to just demo some of the tools and give you a quick overview, but I have links to tutorials and examples and more information on the handout. So if you feel like, oh, I liked that tool, but I'm not really sure how to use it, you can check the handout after. Also, if you can grab a piece of scratch paper, yes, actual paper, I'm going to have you take some notes throughout the session. You won't have to submit them, so it can be any kind of scratch paper. All right. So the focus of today's session is I'm going to first talk really briefly about just who are our students, just to kind of set the stage. And then I'll talk a little bit about learner variability, and then just introduce literacy and learning needs, because this is going to help us determine what digital tools are most appropriate and effective for our situation. And then the majority of the presentation, I'm going to spend talking about intentional use of digital tools. And I'm going to break these down into 3 areas. We're going to look at tools for representation, or tools for providing content to our students, tools for action and expression, and tools for engagement. So the first thing I want to start with is just the idea that learner variability is the norm. When we talk about diverse learners, all of our learners are diverse. You might have English learners, you might have students with disabilities, or you might have students that don't fall into any of those categories, but still may have very different strengths and weaknesses. I linked in your handout a video called Variability Matters. And there's just about 7 minutes that I recommend watching, because it gives an excellent explanation of how even when learners may not have any obviously different characteristics, we all approach learning and problem solving in a different way. And so when we design our instruction to align with different ways that our students think, process, and learn, we can reduce barriers that they may face in instruction and really help maximize the effectiveness of our instruction. So that's what we're really going to look at today. I want to talk a little bit about universal design for learning. I'm not going to go into depth, but I have put some links on your handout. But basically, universal design for learning is a framework for teaching that aligns with the learning networks in our brains and really aligns with how all students learn. And so I'm going to use this framework to organize the digital tools we're going to talk about today. So the overall principles of universal design for learning is that when we are teaching, we should strive to provide multiple means of engagement, a variety of different ways to engage our students, to grab their attention, to help them stay focused, to help them persist. We should also provide multiple means of representation. So when we're providing content and instruction, if we can do this in a variety of ways, this is going to benefit our students. And then also to provide multiple means of action and expression. So a variety of ways for our students to practice what they're learning and to demonstrate what they know. Now, most of you are probably already doing a lot of these things, and you may be really skillful at them in face-to-face classes or even online environments. But this is the framework that I'm going to use for us to think about how to integrate digital tools intentionally and effectively. Just another link that you have on your handout is just a resource. There are interactive UDL guidelines. So if you think, I really want to know more about barriers students might face with accessing content, you can take a look at this online, and all of it is clickable. So if you look at comprehension, you can click on that and get a variety of resources and strategies for ways to support students' comprehension. So this is an excellent resource when you're thinking about instructional design. Again, I could actually talk to you all day about UDL, but I think most of you are probably here for the digital tools, so I'm going to move on to that. So if you're like me, in March, your inbox was full of things like this: 350 online amazing resources, 75 digital tools, and you might have looked and been like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How do I learn all of these tools? Which ones should I implement? It was kind of overwhelming, right? There is no shortage of digital tools. We have no shortage of resources, but how do we figure out which ones to pick, which ones to use, when to use them? This is where I think we can be most effective. And just a quick side note, I definitely don't recommend that you learn and try all 350 tools. That's too much for you and too much for the students. So when we're thinking about designing intentionally, we want to start by thinking about our student variability and then our student learning outcomes. So what are the student learning outcomes and what are our lesson goals? When we start with the goal in mind and then think about what barriers might our students face in reaching that goal, accessing our content, completing the assignments, or doing what we need them to do, then we can think about which digital tools we can use to help them reach those goals and reduce the barriers in the way of those goals. So we can be really intentional. We also want to remember that our students' variability includes their strengths and their preferences, in addition to their challenges. So if we have creative students, there are digital tools we can use to give them options for demonstrating their understanding that tap into their creativity. So we're going to look more at those. Just a few principles of intentional design. Again, we know that students need to access and understand information. They need to demonstrate knowledge and understanding and engage and communicate. And again, these line up with those three areas of universal design for learning. So our digital tools should support our instructional goals. They should be meaningful. They should reduce barriers and support students' needs. And they should not take over the instruction and the assessment. It's a good idea to remember that oftentimes less is more. I think when we learn about a new tool, we get excited. Oh, this looks really cool. How can I fit it into my instruction? But instead, we want to think first, what is my goal? And then we can look for a tool that supports the goal. So this is just a chart, and this is on your handout too. These are some common barriers and challenges that we see our students having in classes. And many of these things are intensified in online learning environments. So our students face academic challenges that might include reading and writing. Many of our students have executive function challenges. These are more of those soft skills, like understanding expectations, following instructions, breaking down tasks. So if students get a big project or a big essay, how do they chunk that down? Time management, self-monitoring, these are all much more difficult when you're learning by yourself. And then also motivation, keeping focus. And for many of our students, if they've been struggling, they may have learned helplessness. They may struggle with their confidence and look at a task and be like, ooh, I'm probably not going to be able to do that. And then they might move on. So we're going to look at some tools that can help address some of these challenges. So I want to first start by looking at tools that can support representation. So providing multiple means of representation. So accessing information and input is one of the big challenges for our students, particularly in the online environment. So we're going to look at ways to support reading challenges, comprehension, and then some of these executive function challenges by providing multiple means of representation. So input includes content and directions, as well as just textual material that we give our students. So a lot of times we think about students needing to read and understand our textbook, and they do, but our input also includes the instructions that we're giving them, the activities, our teacher talk, and when we're online, this becomes much more text-based. Also, our students don't have as many opportunities to ask clarifying questions, and we're not always there to see that look on their face that shows us they don't understand and help guide them. So we're going to look at a few digital tools and strategies to address providing comprehensible input. So we're going to look at creating step-by-step instructions, videos, chunking information, resource banks, and providing digital text. Whoops. So the first one is to provide step-by-step instructions. This seems really obvious, so some of you might be like, yeah, okay, this isn't really a digital tool, but just providing clear step-by-step instructions, especially for technology. Some of our students don't know how to access Google Docs. So if we give them an assignment and we say, do this in Google Docs, that's going to be a barrier for some of our students. So before we ask them with the assignment instructions, if we provide clear step-by-step instructions for how to access Google Docs, how to share Google Docs, and we build that in ahead of time, our students are going to be able to focus more on their learning and not be as tripped up by that small piece of technology. Also, if we have students use a new technology, something like creating a video or doing something else that's a little more involved, in addition to step-by-step instructions, it's really important to give students an easy or a low stakes assignment to do with that new tool before they have to use it for a graded assignment. So for example, I'm going to have my students do a video project. So in the very beginning of the semester, I'm going to teach them how to use that tool, and I'm going to have them do a quick introduction video. So they're going to learn how to do it with content they already know. They're just introducing themselves to build community. And then later in the semester, when we're deep into the content and they have a higher stakes assignment, when I ask them to create the video, that's not going to add an added layer of stress and an added barrier because they already know how to do it. So those are the two things, step-by-step instructions and a time for students to kind of play with any new tool before it's used as an assessment. So in addition to this, it can also be really helpful to screencast video instructions for our students. Now, I was going to show you a really quick screencast, but I saw in the email that everybody is doing that for their top class this week. So I think you guys probably all know how to do screencast, but I highly, highly recommend it. Even if you do just a 30-second video to show students how to access something or how to upload something, it can really reduce that barrier. You can also use it to provide models of what an assignment should look like or how you expect students to go through the assignment. So if you want students to work collaboratively and provide comments on a Google Doc, you can take 30 seconds and do a quick screen grab of you creating and replying to a comment on a Google Doc to show them exactly how to do it. And we have amazing programs. Screencastify goes right into Chrome. It's a Chrome plugin. You can highlight your cursor. You can have your face in the corner. Loom is also really great. And there are a variety of others. But these are two of my favorite, also because they don't put the watermark on your video. But anyway, just a quick screencast video can go a long way to supporting your students. Another strategy which can be really helpful is to chunk information with questions. So if you're using video information, it's hard when you're not in a face-to-face class to see how well your students are understanding. So something that you can do is embed comprehension questions within a video. If you were lecturing in class, you'd probably stop and ask questions or have your students turn to a partner and discuss. But when you're just providing a video lecture, you don't have that option. But you can build that in. And there's a great free program called Edpuzzle, which allows you to embed comprehension questions throughout your video. And these videos can be teacher-created videos. They can also be any videos that you can access online. So if you assign a YouTube video or a Khan Academy video, you can import that right into the program and embed your own questions into it. So I love Edpuzzle for a variety of reasons. But if you don't want to learn a new technology and you're just screencasting a presentation, you can also put in a placeholder and say, okay, pause here and now answer this question. And you can have Google Forms that they fill in to submit the question, or they can do it on a Google Doc and submit it. But having those sections within your screencast or using Edpuzzle to pause, it gives students a brain break, and it also helps them regulate their own understanding, because if they don't get the question right, then they know, oh, okay, I missed that. Otherwise, they might just keep watching thinking that they're understanding. So I made a quick screencast here so you guys can see what Edpuzzle looks like from the student view. So this is a video that I made. It's a recorded lecture that I did. And then you can see on the bottom, these little dots show up everywhere there's a question. And then over here, they can also see a list of when the questions show up throughout the video, so they know what's coming. This is a little confusing, I realized at the last minute, because I am talking in the video and I'm also explaining Edpuzzle. So I'm both of the voices in there. Apologies in advance. Oops, that didn't work. Okay.
This is also an example of active learning. It's very hard to not be engaged.
This is the lecture
if you're
part.
doing a hands-on activity in a cooperative learning group or teaching somebody your content. You can see the correct answer here, but I'm going to intentionally choose the wrong answer so you see what happens. When you choose the wrong answer, it will give students the option to go back and rewatch that section so that they can try to get it correct. They can also skip and move on with distractions and alternatives. So engagement actually is motivation plus implementation. You get the choice to go back and rewatch even when you get the answer correct, just in case you want to check your information. I also always add one question or food for thought at the very end of the video to encourage students to watch all the way to the end. I have noticed many students stop at the last question.
Okay, so that was just a quick video so you could see what it looks like from the student's perspective. I also love that as the teacher, you actually get a list of what students watched the video, how much of it they watched, and what questions they got correct or incorrect. And it was looking at this data that made me realize I always wanted to have a question or a comment, food for thought, at the very end of the video, because I noticed many students stopped watching right at the point of the last embedded question. But this really helps you see if a lot of students are getting questions wrong, then you know, oh, maybe I didn't explain that very clearly and I need to go back and check. Or if one or two students are really struggling, then you know, okay, I have to reach out and see what those students need help with. Another thing that can help students to access your content and your information is just creating an online resource bank with multimedia. So this is an example of an assignment related to World War I. And here I've provided videos, websites, visuals, and articles. So a variety of different sources. When you're in class, you're often showing visuals, you're talking, you have all of these different cues. So rather than just assigning one video or one article, if you can give students a variety of sources that they can draw their information from, that can be really helpful. And this is done on Padlet, which is like an online bulletin board. And one of the things I love about Padlet is you can create these columns. So you can sort the information and then students can pick and choose. And you can tell them you have to use one article and one other media. It doesn't have to be a free choice. Often providing some sort of parameters or boundaries around the activity is more helpful for students. Also, if you're going to have them do some sort of research activity in a lower level class where students aren't well versed in it yet, this is a great way to kind of curate different sources that are appropriate and have them try out pulling from different sources and synthesizing information before you let them loose to go do all of the research on their own. Another thing I love about Padlet is you can embed it, you can embed it directly into your Laulima site. Okay, the next part that I want to show you is related to reading comprehension. And even though we are teaching college, we may have students who really struggle with reading comprehension and who are English learners or just kind of struggling readers. So one way to support them is providing electronic text, because electronic text can have built-in features that support them, like text-to-speech. So if they're struggling readers, if they have an electronic text, there are a lot of programs, and most operating systems now have built-in text-to-speech features. So the student can read it and listen to it at the same time. They can also have vocabulary lookup just with the click of a button. They also have, there are programs that will allow students to annotate and highlight and then collect those. So I want to show one program that does all of these things that's free, because when students are reading in online classes, it's a lot more independent and they're really expected to understand and persist through without the opportunity to ask clarifying questions or have check-ins. So there's a program called Read and Write. Used to be called Read and Write Gold, and we used to have a license at KCC, but now it's a Google plugin and it's free for teachers. And if you install this plugin into Google, you get this little puzzle piece, which is actually purple. And when you click on that, this toolbar will show up above any Google Docs, or any website. And you can use the text-to-speech and all of these different features on the different websites. So it has a dictionary. It even has a picture dictionary. If you click on a word, it'll give you the definition and an image. TTS stands for text-to-speech. It'll create audio. It can create a screen mask so students only see the line they're reading about. It has translation, and highlighters are some of the biggest features. One thing that I love for students who are reading a lot of text or doing research of some sort, they can annotate digital text, and this can be websites or text. And I'll just show you a quick video. They can annotate, so as the teacher, you can tell them what to look for. I want you to find examples of these different things, and you can give them a key with different color coding. They can highlight it, and then they can export those annotations. And that can help the student learn how to take notes and annotate, but it can also help you as the teacher because you can collect it. Then you can, for one, see that they're doing the reading, and for two, you can see how well they're doing with the reading. So here's a quick video.
Carrie, could you make the video larger? It was kind of hard to see in the last one. Could it fill the whole screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Is it? Oh, I have to click play.
Highlighters in Read and Write for Google Chrome to do research and extract key information from docs and websites. The highlighters on the Read and Write toolbar can be used on the web to identify key information as you're reading. To use, just select some text and click a highlighter button. Your highlights can be extracted into a new Google Doc using the Collect Highlights button. Just choose which colors you want to include and how to sort them, and click OK. This will automatically generate a new doc in your Google Drive containing your highlights, as well as a link back to the original source. You can also collect highlights the same way from a Google Doc. To learn more about Read and Write, visit texthelp.com.
Okay. Okay, there we go. One other really cool feature of, Read and Write that I want to show you is vocabulary. So if you have English learners, or if you're teaching something like science that has a lot of challenging vocabulary, students can make a vocabulary sheet automatically with images. So I'm trying to, there we go.
This video demonstrates how to use the vocabulary tool in Read and Write for Google Chrome. The vocab feature allows you to create a vocabulary list from individual words or terms. To use in a Google Doc, just use the colored highlighters to highlight individual vocabulary words. Then click the vocab button. This will automatically create a new doc in your Google Drive containing a vocabulary chart. It includes dictionary definitions, images from the picture dictionary, and an extra column for notes. This doc can now be easily customized for your individual use or even shared with students. The vocab tool also works the same way on websites. To learn more about Read and Write for Google Chrome, visit texthelp.com.
Okay. So that was a variety. There are lots more out there, but that was just a variety of digital tools that can be used to support providing multiple means of representation and reducing some barriers to accessing content. So take out that piece of paper. One of the reasons I'm having you take notes on a piece of paper is to kind of model for you that when you're teaching online, you can also build in non-online activities. You can have students take a little break from the computer and do something on paper or look at something in a physical book. And it gives a little bit of a break from this overwhelming environment that we're now spending so much time in. So I'm going to give you about 1 minute and write a comment on one of the following. So a barrier that you can reduce with one of the tools or strategies you just heard about, a tool or strategy you'd like to try, or any idea that you had for using a digital tool. Okay, great. I want to move on now and look at some digital tools for providing multiple means of action and expression. So now we're shifting from digital tools for when we're providing the content to looking at what our students are doing with it. So some of the challenges here could be writing, again, understanding expectations of the assignment, and then more of these soft skills like planning and organization. So breaking down tasks, time management. So these are all challenges in this area as well. So think about providing, if you can, options and variety for demonstrating understanding in knowledge. Most of our classes don't require students to write or take tests for every assignment or for every part of the assignment. So we have options of ways that we can have our students demonstrate their understanding. But even if you're in a class where you have to have a test or you have to have a writing assignment, the stages leading up to that final assignment can also have flexibility and variability built in to support our students. Some of the challenges here is if students don't really understand the assignment, they don't have as many opportunities face-to-face to just say, oh, I don't really know what I have to do. And many of our students, as I'm sure you know, might not just reach out and say, hey, I don't know what to do. They might just sit at home and feel stuck and just try. There's also, it's harder sometimes to provide scaffolding and the modeling. In a face-to-face class, we can really quickly show an example, and we might not think to do that online. They also don't have a classmate sitting right next to them to turn and say, what are we supposed to do? So thinking about ways to build in supports for all of these. So some of the digital tools that we're going to look at here are using presentations, audio or video, infographics, and digital books to have students demonstrate their understanding and knowledge. So this might seem really obvious, but if students need to demonstrate their understanding, if you typically have them write an essay to summarize their understanding, you can provide them the option to do it in a presentation instead. I find that many of my students have a block when it comes to writing. And so if I tell them, you can write a summary to show me that you understood, or you can put it in Google Slides. You can give me a slideshow. So many more of my students choose the slideshow, and they feel a lot more confident doing it because they're not caught up worrying about their grammar and the essay structure, because if that's not what I'm assessing, that doesn't have to be part of the assignment. I always tell my students, when you're creating a presentation, don't type your essay on the slides, but if you don't have enough detail to show me your understanding on the slide, you can add narration to it, or you can fill in the notes section to add more detail. I often have students also do group collaboration in Google Slides, but when I do that, I provide a model and instructions in the slide with a template. I typically, this is an example of an assignment that students did in groups of 3. So the first slide was instructions. The second one was a sample of what each slide should look like. And the third, fourth, and fifth, I just numbered those wrong, but you know what I'm saying, I think. The next ones have the heading for each section that needs to be included in the presentation, and one student is assigned to each of those parts. So when they're doing group work, it's really helpful if they have clear roles. So there are 3 parts, there are 3 group members, each one is responsible for one. And if you feel like it might be a little challenging for them, you can provide the template with those headings. They just make a copy of it, and then of course they can personalize it, but it's like giving them a little bit of an outline. Now, if you're teaching writing, you can also use this as a step in the writing process to help students organize and sequence their ideas in a lower stress environment than when they are thinking about writing an essay. Once they've gotten their ideas down and organized like this, it's much easier for them to turn it into full sentences and turn it into an essay. You can also very easily provide feedback using the comment feature, and then when students have questions, they can reply, and you can get emails showing that they've corrected it or that they emailed back with a question. Another thing you can do is you can have students create a video presentation. And I know some of you on here already do this because I've seen some really excellent examples. But Adobe Spark is a really great way for students to create collaborative video presentations. If they start in Google Slides, they can download their Google Slides and just populate them right into Adobe Spark. Again, if you're gonna have them do this, consider having them play with it with something easy before it's a higher stake assessment. So I just have a quick tutorial.
I'm going to click on the blue Create a Project button, and for this example, I'm going to create a new video. First, I need to give it a name. Then I can choose a template to build my story from or make up my own. And now I'm ready to start building. The feature I'd like to share with you today is the collaboration feature. You can invite others to collaborate with you on your Adobe Spark video project by clicking on this icon on the top of the screen. You then enter another email address and click Invite. That person will receive an email inviting them to join the project. Additionally, if they log into their Spark account with that email, they will see the project available for them to edit.
Okay, so that was just a really quick overview, but I have more detailed tutorials on the handout. if you think you want to try it. Another really simple way to provide options for students that most of our students have access to is just to allow students to demonstrate their understanding by doing a quick video or a quick audio recording. They can just use their mobile device. So if students need to demonstrate understanding of a particular concept, if it doesn't have to be in writing, I allow my students to just record and upload an audio file or a video file if they prefer. I don't require it, but for some of my students, it's much easier to just speak than to write, and I get a clearer picture of what they know because they're not held back by the writing conventions. Another option is infographics, which Pictochart and Canva are two really great free options. This is similar to using Google Slides, where students can organize and present key ideas and key details to demonstrate their understanding without having to do a test or do some other type of writing or something else that may be more challenging for them. And this is a great opportunity for your creative students. I've had a lot of students, this is actually one of my students' examples, I've had a lot of students who really enjoy creating the Pictocharts or the infographics, and I feel like they end up putting more effort into the assignment because they're enjoying it. One other way that you can have your students have options is by having them create digital books. And again, like the PowerPoint or the Google Slides or the infographic, it's just another way for them to demonstrate their understanding. But again, for many of them, they really enjoy it, so they seem to spend more time on it. This is just a very quick book walk with no audio of a book that one of my students created for an assignment. So Book Creator is really easy to use, and it has a lot of different templates. And like Google Slides, it gives students a way to sequence their information and demonstrate their understanding in a pretty low stakes setting. And I didn't include it in this example, but students can add voice narration, and that you can also read the books with text to speech. One other aspect of giving students different options for action and expression is supporting them with task and time management. It's much harder online to monitor students' progress, to kind of walk and look over the shoulder and see how they're doing. And students need to do a lot more self-monitoring. Often in online classes, maybe all of the work is due Sunday instead of a little something at each class meeting. So something that I created when we switched to online in March were weekly checklists and check-ins. If you use Laulima, the checklists on there are fantastic. But if you're not using Laulima, or if you want a way that students can ask questions, I created these two different templates in Google Form. And the link is on the handout, so if you want to make a copy and personalize it, you can. This one here is just a list of the different assignments that they have to complete that week. So they check it off, and then there's an area at the bottom where they can ask questions. So they submit this every week, and if they have a question, it's part of the assignment rather than them having to send me an email to ask their question. This other one is a check-in, which is a little bit more of a personal, how are you doing? So I included some images and just, how are you feeling this week? And this one was really helpful to me because when I had students fill it out at the week and say, I'm not doing well, then I knew I need to send that student an email and say, hey, how are you doing? Because if the student is feeling overwhelmed and alone, they're probably not really going to be engaging in the class either. But it really gave them a way to ask questions, and I got questions from a lot of students who didn't typically email me questions. So this was a much easier way for them to just respond and kind of check in each week. So take about 1 more minute. I just threw a lot of digital tools for action and expression at you, and write down one thought about a barrier, a tool, or just another idea you had. Okay, let's move on to engagement, arguably the most important thing that we can do with our students. So some of the barriers to engagement can be motivation, engaging in tasks, persisting, focus, and also using feedback. Again, some of the challenges is they don't have that peer support, and some students are really motivated by that interaction. It's also sometimes hard for students to know if they're doing it right. So some of the tools we can use are collaborative documents, practice, applications that allow them to practice, some online discussions, and then synchronous mini activities. So collaborative documents like Google Docs, most people are probably familiar with that, but this is a great way to engage students. If they all have a role, like in group presentations, they can co-create and give each other feedback. You can also, as the teacher, you can use suggest, which is like track changes, or you can add comments to help the students, and you can check in on those in real time so the students will know if they're doing it right. Also, with this kind of collaborative document, you can work towards mastery-oriented feedback by giving students credit for revising rather than focusing on credit for initial accuracy. Another cool tool that I recently learned about that allows you to add text or audio comments and to embed a rubric into Google Docs is something called Kaizena. So I have a quick tutorial of this one as well.
Sometimes this is a lot to write in a comment, and maybe your students would do better listening. If you want to leave verbal comments, you can do that with a plugin called Kaizena. So let's say I want to leave this same comment. I can do this with a voice message. So I highlight it, click, rather than start by saying, so now I can stop and post. And when the student sees this, they can click on play and they can hear my comment related to that section of text. I can also leave the same comment via text. So then when the student opens up their Kaizena add-on, they can see textual comments as well as verbal comments. I can also add a rubric. The rubric is made up of skills that you pre-program with criteria. Let's take a look. As I go through my student's assignment, I'll highlight a section and then give feedback on that skill. For example, the introduction. Again, using the skills that I pre-programmed in with criteria. Then, once I'm finished, I select rubric and it collects all of the skills. It will even tally and give a total score. And then I can even include summary comments for my students.
So students can also reply with text comments or audio comments as well.
Sometimes this is a lot to write.
Definitely don't need to hear that twice. Okay. Another great way is to use Quizlet or other game-like apps to give students opportunities to practice. These are typically low stakes, but Quizlet has a lot of different features. There's flashcards, there's a game. This one in the bottom is these asteroids fall down and you have to type in the answer before it hits the bottom. So these are ways you can encourage students to engage and practice in a more fun setting and with lower stakes. Also, Padlet, which I showed before, can be used for online discussions with text. This is an example of presentations that students of mine did. They can post something and then reply to each other. I always require them to reply to at least 2 classmates to build up that engagement. I've also used this for a KWL. If you're not familiar with that, K is what do you know, and W is what do you want to know, or what do you think you will learn if you think they're gonna say, I don't wanna know anything. And they fill that out at the beginning of a unit, and then at the end, they fill in the L column, which is what have I learned? And they can go back and see and make comments. And so it just builds in a little more reflection and conversation. You can also do online discussions with Flipgrid. And students can talk to each other and have asynchronous discussion. They can see each other, and it is a really great way to build community. So let's take a very quick look. This is just an excerpt of my class. Whoops. Or it isn't. Okay.
Hi everyone, I hope you're safe and healthy at home with your families. The culturally responsive teaching project that I sort of brainstormed and came up with was a family cooking project. I really love your idea. I wonder if you could use something like Book Creator to compile.
Okay, that's just a really quick look, but hopefully you could see you have a grid where you see everybody's videos and then students can reply to each other. And I've noticed with my students, they often give a lot more thoughtful replies because they can stop and re-record as many times as they want, which helps them build that confidence rather than in class, sometimes discussion is more limited. And then the last thing we're going to talk about, which I know some of you have been waiting for, is synchronous mini activities. So I highly encourage doing some synchronous classes if you can. If you can't, that's okay. You can still build community through Flipgrid and group collaboration. But I do recommend that you use synchronous time intentionally. If you can screencast it, do it asynchronously. Use your synchronous time for collaboration discussion. I usually try to keep my instruction just to instructions about what they're going to do, and then I put them in breakout rooms and I give them small chunks of activities to work on. I also always give a Google Doc or Google Slides that includes the instructions, because once you're in the breakout room, you can't see my slide anymore and you might forget what I asked you to do. It also allows me, I can jump through the breakout rooms, but when I'm not in someone's breakout room, I can look into the Google Doc or the Google Slides and see how everybody's doing. So if nothing is happening on a document, I know I need to go give that group some help. So this is just an example of what that looks like. And we are going to try it right now. Usually I do this for about 30 minutes. We're gonna do it for about 6 minutes, just so you get a little taste of what it's like to get into those breakout rooms. So the first thing I want you to do is, if you can open up this Google Doc, and I just put the URL in the chat if you need it. It is also linked to the bottom of that digital handout. So open up the Google Doc, and then I'm gonna put you into breakout rooms. In your breakout rooms, take a few minutes to discuss the questions on the top of the document, and then collaboratively fill out the document. There's a section for each group. Usually when I do this with my students, each group has their own document that I create and share so that I have access. You guys are gonna be all on one group today. Jamie, do you mind creating 5 breakout rooms, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Oops. You should see a pop-up and click on that says join breakout room. If you don't see it, you might want to minimize other screens so that it comes to the top. We can probably pause the recording for a few minutes.
Yeah, good call. Thanks.
Think about that. Oh. Think
Sorry,
about
Carrie.
that flexibility and student choice. And remember, less can be more. It's better for you a lot of the time not to learn a bunch of new tools, and it can be better for the students. If you pick 2 or 3 that you use consistently and effectively, that's much better than trying to throw in 2 or 3 new ones every week. So my last piece of advice is start small and keep building. If this is new to you, pick one tool and try it out, and then you can add on. Try not to overwhelm yourself and your students, because if you're feeling overwhelmed, they probably are too. So that's all for today. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I know it's 10 o'clock, but I'll stick around. And I'm going to put that digital handout in the chat one more time in case anybody missed it. And I was monitoring the chat, so if you put a question in there and you want to ask me now, please feel free.
Yeah, I have a question, Carrie. Thank you so much for all of that. That was so wonderful. I'm really excited to use the breakout rooms feature in the fall, and I wasn't teaching in the spring, so I didn't really have many chances to practice Zoom. And I don't know if you said it already or not, but are you able to put into the breakout room like a Google Doc with instructions or what they're supposed to be working on as one of the screens? Like, can you make like a fake person, so to speak, that has a view of the questions or anything, or do they have to like toggle back and forth between another web browser and Zoom?
So that's a great question. You can't insert something into the breakout rooms. You can jump through, but you can only be in one at a time.
Okay.
But something that you could do is you could share the Google Doc or the Google Slide, something with the instructions, and then tell each group, choose one group leader, and that person is going to share their screen. So you can have one student in each group sharing their screen with the instructions, and then they can discuss and have that there. And you could do a quick jump through each room to make sure somebody is sharing the screen, and then talk them through how to do it if they aren't already. But you have to set that, you have to make the setting in Zoom so that anybody can share screen. The default is only the host.
Okay. Oh, that's such a great idea. Okay, does anyone have a screencast with directions on that? So they just have to, that's all they have to do is, that's all we have to do is set it so that everyone can screencast and then provide instructions to the students to choose one person in each group to do that. Is that correct?
Yes, it's actually not too hard. If you have, do you see the share button on your toolbar? Can you see that right now?
No.
Okay.
I see a leave and no, I don't see a share.
Usually, so if that's turned on, there's a little green share button. And when you're the host, you will always see that. And there's a little arrow. It's like a caret next to the share button when you're the host. And if you click on that, you can change the settings inside the Zoom meeting. You don't even have to go out. I can do a screencast when we get off of here and send it to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Another thing, Sarah, that I did was now I did this when I was doing a face-to-face hybrid, was that I embedded the Google Doc into the lesson page. So that's an option that you can do too. It's just have the student go directly into the lesson page, and boom, there's the Google Doc, and they're typing into it. But one interesting thing, Carrie, that we found when we were in our breakout room was that we kind of needed 2 screens to really do this. So I'm not sure if students are going to be able to have 2 screens. Like I was able to type in my Google Doc, but then I saw what the other person was doing on their share screen.
Yeah, so when I do this with my students, I usually have them discuss first. So I was mentioning this when everyone came back. I would never give my students just 6 minutes. That was not good modeling. So I usually tell them, take 10 or 15 minutes to discuss, because it's usually, deeper content than what I had you guys do today. And so I tell them discuss first, and then they can minimize the Zoom and open up the Google Docs and they can type.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so even if they don't see each other,
excellent.
they can still hear each other, so they can talk. Yeah,
I'd like to suggest too, in my math classes, everyone has a smartphone. So if you download Google Docs onto your smartphone, a lot of students take pictures and embed directly into Google Docs. You can do that if they want to take a picture of any kind of final answer, and they can also type in the Google Docs. So I have like so many groups assigned, and they're all typing at the same time and embedding pictures. So I know that might solve the two monitor situation.
Yeah,
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Excellent idea.
Any other questions or suggestions you want to share with the group?
I just wanted to say something about what our breakout room was doing, is that we had the Google Docs open and Zoom, and then we chatted, like we made visual contact, and then we went to the Google Doc and just kept talking, but we're typing. So we were kind of doing that in parallel, kind of audio and like literal or literate or whatever. Yeah. So being in parallel like that, we kept the conversation going, but we're also typing at the same time.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, you can also, similar to Sarah's question before, if you feel like that's going to be a lot for students, you can have one student be the scribe, and they can share their screen with the Google Doc open, and they can do all of the typing, and everybody is talking. So there are a couple of different ways you can do it, and you can either tell them what to do or let them, maybe give them a suggestion and then let them figure out what works best for them. I'm going to take a look through the chat real quick and see if I missed any questions, but feel free to shout out if you have other things you want to share or questions.
Carrie, there are some questions about the ad puzzle, and folks, feel free to grab your mic and ask their questions again in who posted in the chat.
Okay, Carly, this is Kwan Hong. Yep, thank you very much for all the information. I really feel much more confident after this presentation. I have a question regarding the ad puzzle. Do students have to register with them, so on the website, in order for us to receive the report?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a couple things you can do. The students can register, or you can assign the students in your class and then they just sign in. So they don't really have to register. You've already assigned them. Okay. Or you can give them a code and then they do create an account, but it's free. So either way, you can pre-assign them or they create an account to access.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hey kids, I need to get my little toy out of here, don't I?
You know the text-to-speech feature on Read and Write?
Yes.
That just sounds like a wonderful plugin for all the various options. But I was wondering, like how much you've played around with it. How good a job does it do for text-to-speech? And yeah, just get your thoughts on that.
It's not too bad. It is a little robotic because it's not a human, but you actually have a variety of options. You can change to different speakers. So you have a couple of different accents you can choose, male, female. So you can kind of listen and see which one you like the best. The one thing I will caution you is, just like Google Maps, Read and Write does not do super well with Hawaiian words.
Yeah, okay.
So, you can kind of give your students a little heads up. I've had my students use it with a variety of texts, and with the texts that have Hawaiian words, I tell them just skip over or just completely close your ears when it gets to a Hawaiian word, because it's going to be wrong. Like it can probably handle aloha, but anything more than that. And so if you have foreign language words, it may stumble a little. So if you have a particular text with words like that, you might want to preview it. But in general, it's pretty good. And students can set it so that it highlights as it's reading, so they can see exactly which word it's on. But yeah, it does a pretty good job. It's an awesome plugin.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Somebody asked how long has Edpuzzle been around in the chat. I have no idea, honestly. I learned about it about 5 years ago, so at least that long, but I have no idea if I was late to the party or.
Oh,
or,
Yushin answered that it was 2013.
Oh, okay. There you
So
go.
yeah, that's great. I was only asking because I find sometimes I'll try this new tool and I'm really jazzed about it, and then it flops and disappears. I'm like, no, all the work I put into that is gone now. So now, just from having experienced that, I always look into how long it's been around. But yeah, 2013 is great.
Oh, that's a good strategy. That brings me to another thing that I didn't mention, but one of the reasons that I wanted to frame this from looking at the purpose rather than looking at the tool is if one of these tools does go away, if you have already thought through what you're using it for, like why you're using it, what it's supporting, it'll be a lot easier to shift and replace than if you're tied to, I like this tool and I'm using it. Of course, if you have all of your lessons created in something and it disappears, that is definitely no fun. Okay, I'm looking to see if there are any other questions, but I don't see any right now. All right, thanks everybody.
This was fantastic. I'm going to spend like the next week or two like just unpacking the handout. This was so fantastic. Thank you so much, Carrie. And I already talked to Carrie when everyone was in the breakout rooms, and like we're going to get her for more events. So this was awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming. Feel free to unmute.
Thanks, Carrie.
And say goodbye, and thank you.
And
Thank you, Carrie.
And don't forget, we have the final Top to Go webinar tomorrow.
Oh, and testing
Oh.
quizzes. Woo-hoo.
And don't miss it.
Be there. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, everybody. Have
Thanks,
a good
you guys.
one.